And I prepared a little PowerPoint presentation. It's only a couple hundred slides. A few slides that will help kind of put into perspective the healthcare administration degree programs, what we're seeking to accomplish, what our students are able to do, and then we'll answer some questions. To start out, just to put things in perspective, this is a chart that has, you can't see it, it's over here, it says average life expectancy at birth. Average life expectancy is here. And the cost per person per year of healthcare. And you see Japan is 83, 82, 83 years is the life expectancy. Now, life expectancy is a measure of wellness. It's not a perfect measure. It's not all-inclusive, but it's one measure of the wellness of a population. What's your expected life expectancy when you're born? And that is sort of brings in together all aspects of health and wellness. Now, there are many other measurements of wellness that you can think about, and those are you can measure those easily. But life expectancy kind of brings it all into one as one measurement. And then you can see Japan is up here, South Korea, Mexico, Hungary. The cost to provide care, the United States is over here. We have an intermediary life expectancy. Our wellness is 79, the life expectancy is about 79 years when you're born in the United States. But it costs us considerably more in this country to achieve that level of wellness. That's kind of a problem, because what this illustrates, not only the cost, but it also, if you dig down into these numbers, it's the access to care. Who has the care? We provide very expensive care for certain, let me reword that. There's care that's provided that's very expensive just because of our structure of our system in the United States. So this chart really shows how much the United States is off the chart with regard to being able to provide wellness. And these other instances, these are industrialized countries, all the other dots. And you can see the trend line is all right around here. So this is what we're up against. This is the context in which, thank you for coming. This is the context in which our students come to us. So to bring it a little closer to home, as I mentioned, we're going to talk about these programs. And how many have experienced this kind of situation when you go to your doctor? Have you ever been sitting there on the exam table for 15 minutes, 20 minutes, kind of cold? You're wondering how long, I've been here for 10 minutes, right? Clearly not a process designed by patients, right? Once you have that care, you get the bill. This particular hospital bill is pretty easy to figure out. But this explanation of benefits and the bills that you get are like hieroglyphics, right? There's all kinds of codes, and you don't know what you're paying for, what's not being paid, who's paying, what's paying. Another problem, we have a very complex financial structure here in the US. And then there's technology. Have you ever felt that your doctor is spending more time with the technology than they are looking at you? Because, hey Bob, thanks for coming. Because technology has created new ways that care is being provided. Some of it's good, some of it is not so good. Some of it, physicians feel it gets in the way of their patient-provider relationship. We've yet to reap a lot of rewards from electronic health records here in the US. It will come, but it's not here yet. So I just want to briefly go over, and Janet, if I forget anything, just jump right in, please. just some of the key differentiators that I think are important and our students find particularly important in our program. Both the bachelor's and master's were developed by healthcare practitioners, and by and large, we have healthcare practitioners. By that I mean people working in healthcare in our programs. And so that is a key differentiator. There aren't very many programs, if at all, certainly not bachelor's programs and probably not master's programs that have that differentiation. So we require 2 years of experience at the bachelor's level or at the master's level. The bachelor's degree is a little bit less restrictive than that, but basically we want someone connected to the healthcare realm. They can speak the language, they understand the challenges. And we find when I look at feedback from our students, this is a very key element that they really appreciate, especially at the master's level where you have more experienced individuals in the program. They find that the level of discussions and the level of collegiality and interactions with their class colleagues is so vitally important. And so this is particularly important in our programs. Both the bachelor's and master's are squarely focused on the healthcare issues. You know, what other business is there where your what you can charge is regulated, but what you have to pay for your supplies and equipment and labor is completely unregulated. So your costs are unregulated. Vendors can charge whatever they want, but what you bill a patient or what you bill Medicare or Medicaid or insurance companies or private payers is regulated, and you have no room to change that. So your costs go up, you're squeezed. So those idiosyncrasies make for a very different kind of management and leadership expectations. Both the bachelor's and master's have a capstone, which brings together all of the skills that the students have developed and obtained throughout the course of the program. These concepts are applied to workplace situations, and many of the capstones that students create, and I'll talk a little bit about these toward the end. Many capstones that students create are actually implemented. They're actually real-life projects and plans and changes that are being made in healthcare. And you'll see how that kind of links to those issues that I spoke of just a little while ago. And then in the master's degree, we have this course-to-course project. In the first couple courses of the program, students must decide what area of healthcare they particularly want to focus in on. What issues do they want to try to solve? Where is their passion as managers and leaders? What do they want to really get at and get into and disrupt and change in the healthcare organization, typically where they work? And so they choose this focused area in the first or second class, usually the first class, and then they focus in on that throughout the whole rest of the program. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in just a second. So just to sum up, you know, it's a comprehensive, challenging management degree. It's squarely focused on healthcare issues, but we visit all those things that you would expect in a management and leadership degree program, except we relate them all directly to healthcare. And then we apply them to real-world situations. So I will go over all of these. These are the professional courses in the bachelor's degree. You start out with a survey course, and then you can see there's IT, there's finance, there's law, there's healthcare communication, clinical systems, HR courses, project management, and the capstone at the end. The check marks indicate the courses that comprise the certificate, the undergraduate certificate in healthcare. And so students go through and learn the overview. They learn the nuts and bolts of management and leadership, but each of these courses really is focused in pretty squarely in healthcare issues. The master's degree is similar. Again, here are the certificate, the graduate certificate courses for the master's program. This first course, Healthcare System Design and Innovation, it's a pretty innovative course. It asks students, while they're doing a survey of the healthcare system in the United States, all the components and elements and all the pieces that comprise it, it asks them to start looking at that from a completely different viewpoint, a creative, what we call design thinking viewpoint, where they take it apart and start looking at it from the perspective of the patient. They look at it from the perspective of that person sitting on an exam table, of that person trying to figure out and decipher that bill they got, to figure out how to use a technology that's really going to create better patient outcomes. And so they look at that, they pull this apart, and they really start to think about system design in a different way. How can we make this work better? Because granted, if you think about healthcare, it's an institution that's been around for a long time in this country. And many of the processes and procedures are historically rooted in what was best for the provider. There was a time when the physician was it. And that time still probably exists to some extent. Not so much, but somewhat, some places. And that person created the processes, created that cold exam table with the crinkly paper on it for you to sit on for 20 minutes, wondering what's going to happen next. And physicians play a pretty important role in healthcare. They are the medical part of it, and so I'm not demeaning them at all, but the processes were developed and they evolved and they haven't really changed all that much when you look at really the processes of healthcare. So this first course asks our students to start looking at it from a different perspective and start thinking about that focus area that they want to focus in on. Then, of course, they apply that in project management. They apply it, they kind of test their ideas, and they try to think about a small mini project that they could test those concepts with. And then again, we talk about all of the managerial elements that you think would be important in a management degree, leading up to this capstone at the end. The capstone in the master's program then really had its roots way back here. Students have to start thinking about this very early on. Now they can change, and we've had a couple students who get a couple courses in and they realize that they want to shift gears. We certainly allow that, but they have to kind of make the case for that. It's worked very well, and I'll show you how that's worked.
Michael, is it fair mentioning that this master's program is relatively new remodeling of the program?
Yes, thanks, Janet. This current iteration of the MS in Healthcare Administration had its first cohort started fall of 2015. Before that, it was slightly different. It was more similar to the bachelor's, but fall of 2015 it started with the first cohort, and so we're just starting to see actually those students having gone through the whole program. I've got some examples here to show you. So, just very briefly, just some titles of what our students do, what they do currently when they're in the program, both at the undergrad and grad levels, as well as what they do after they graduate. And often I get phone calls saying, you know what, this capstone has created a new level of career for me because we're implementing this, we're saving money, the outcomes for patients are better, and this has sort of catapulted me up to a higher level. And so you can see we have clinicians, we have business folks. Really, if you think about a hospital and all the different components that are in there, our students represent all those different functions. Our students do not only come from hospitals, though. It's probably the most largest group. But they come from government, they come from insurance companies, they come from GE Healthcare and Cleveland Clinic and VA Medical Center. And again, anything to do with healthcare, insurance, regulatory, government, hospitals, physician practices. vascular surgery clinic in West Palm Beach. Graduate from our program, is the office manager now. They've grown this clinic to like 15 different sites all around southern Florida, and very successful, and attributes much of that success in leadership and management to our program. So let's go back to our problems at the beginning. I'll just pick out a few capstone titles. These come from undergraduate and graduate students. And just to give you a little bit of an example of, okay, we've got these problems, these challenges in healthcare in our country. And many countries have some other challenges. It's not like we're the only one in the world who has these challenges. Other countries do. Every other country in the world, I have to say, thinks that healthcare is a right of their populations, like an education. We haven't quite grappled with that here. So increasing accessibility in a primary care setting at this Cohasset Pediatrics, it's a physician practice. Real problems with scheduling and patients waiting, having their children seen. A whole process analysis and business plan implementation to change the whole structure of how they schedule patients, how they schedule their staff, how their physicians are scheduled, the layout of their office, implementation of technology. Very comprehensive. And again, when you think about those courses, those course titles, the capstone requires students to apply the concepts from every course they've taken to their project. Look at this project through the lenses of all those courses. And so it becomes, these are comprehensive papers that are completed at the end, and then they demonstrate implementation. So decreasing wait times in the emergency department. I won't talk about all of these, but I'll just, this was just a selection last night. I just went through some courses and picked out a sampling of what our students are doing. Again, this was a whole renovation of a birth center, not only addressing patient outcomes, but also provider workflow and effectiveness. So looking at it holistically from an outcome as well as an employer standpoint. This is a mouthful here. Psychological consultative exams using video conferencing to decrease processing time of making a disability decision for veterans. Okay, so this was in the VA system, looking at how they could create a different process to accommodate those challenges that they had in that program. One of our students is implementing in there's a medical center, I think it's in Illinois somewhere, probably Chicago, I think, if I remember right, developing a healthcare services and cost app for mobile devices so that patients can go and compare in their locality, just, I need this service, where's the best place I can get that? Where's the wait time the least? And what's going to hit my insurance the least? I won't read these, you can read these, and just to give you a sense of how comprehensive these are and what areas we cover. Each of these, for the most part, are actually implemented in their facilities. These are actual real projects that the students have put into place and are creating differences. So they're actually changing healthcare one Champlain graduate at a time, basically.
Is there any data on that implementation?
Well, there will be. Part of these are if the student has collected baseline data to begin with, they have that. But often they're in the process. These things take 6 months to several years to implement. And so they will be collecting that data, and I'm sure, so that data comes long after the course ends. For the organization, they will have that data. We would not necessarily have it if it takes that long, but we could probably talk to them and get some.
cool to see that. Implementation.
So we cover all sorts of issues, and I could go on and on and on, but I won't.
Well, can you talk about your, I think she graduated maybe with her master's in 2015 or 14. She did the mammogram study at UVM. And she had
I don't remember what, which
something that was
implementation is digital mammography.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, we've had actually a couple of those. Digital mammography is something that a couple of years ago was coming into play more often in smaller areas. Like larger hospitals had that capability, but smaller ones did not. And so that's a complex process to change from the X-ray film, basically developing the X-ray film and that whole process to digital mammography. And so for a small hospital, it's quite an undertaking. It's very expensive. And so a couple of our CAP studies have addressed just how to do that. What's the business plan? What's the ROI? What's the benefits to the patient? That is clear. But from an overall managerial perspective, there are a lot of pieces to that. So we've had, I think, that person, and then there was one other one. These projects really have patient impact results. And I'll just show you one more here. This title, Injections, How Morale Impacts Quality, A Journey of Creating Unity. This was an intriguing project. This was in the southern part of the United States. There was a group of cancer treatment centers, freestanding cancer clinics, where patients would come in every week or a couple times a week for injections of their chemotherapy treatments or IVs. And I think there was 4 or 5 sites. And it was all under one practice, big group practice of oncologists. And it started, this student realized that they were starting to have a sudden uptick in errors. Luckily, no catastrophic errors, but bad things were going on, and the staff wasn't really doing much about it. And so this capstone, so she talked to me about this back when she was in the very first course, and she went through and applied all the course topics and key concepts and competencies that she developed over the program. This happened to be a master's student. And she wanted to change the culture of this complex clinic because the morale and the assembly line nature. Patients would come in, they get their shots, they go home. They come in, and it's just the same, it's kind of mundane. If you're the provider who needs to check somebody in, give them their IV or their injection, and go on. Many of these people had been there for years and years and years, and it had become just a factory, basically, to put it in blunt terms. So she created a plan to change that by implementation of different technology to take the mundane tasks that the technology could help get rid of or do in a different way. She implemented that. She did training. So this encompassed finance, HR, IT, project planning, everything. This just happened this recently. And it'll be interesting to look at the data. I'll keep in touch with her and look at the data in a year or so and see how that's changed it. But it's impressive. She presented this to the board of oncologists that run this organization. It's been adopted and they're working on it. No, I won't go through. I will kind of end here with just a few more examples that really address these problems and these issues in healthcare. And our students find great reward in this, I think. Our faculty really enjoy this because all of our faculty, because these courses are all such a progression, they all know what everybody's doing in all the other courses. And that's really important because they kind of get a sense of, okay, you've taken these couple of courses and you're working on this project. How do you apply this to what we're studying here in this present course? So it's worked out quite well. And I'll just end here. This is a picture I took a month or two ago in Chicago. These are some, unfortunately, they're not our students. These are some interns, some healthcare executive interns who are studying in various programs. They're at different hospitals learning the ropes of hospital administration, as it turns out. They could be our students very, very easily. They just happen not to be. But I took this, I put this picture here because their smiling faces give me hope. I think there's a bright future for healthcare in this country because we have leaders, young leaders, in our program and elsewhere who are going to figure this out and make for a better system. So I'm intrigued by their smiling, can-do attitude, and that's why I put this picture here. So thank you. That's what I have. And if you have questions and thoughts, Janet, you want to enter in some ideas?
Well, I'm wondering if we should talk about the program curriculum outside of the actual healthcare courses. I think everyone's familiar with what a program evaluation looks like. And the distinctive part of the healthcare bachelor's degree is that it is a completer degree. So that means that students need to have at least 60 credits or an associate's degree before they're eligible to be in this bachelor's degree. And be working in the field. And if they don't have jobs in the healthcare field currently, they are admissible if they have very, very recently been working in healthcare or a related field. And their application includes their, if they speak to their goals as being in healthcare. Because there are some students that are very clearly working in healthcare, they want to stay in healthcare. And there's some that are a little bit peripheral, and that's not as easy an admissions decision, but they're still admissible if they show promise of a future career in healthcare, and if they've had recent experience in healthcare, and or have access to that, because the coursework is, as Michael said, so directly related to the actual, either a place where they can take their theoretical from the classroom and apply it, or draw from their experience and bring it back to the classroom. There's a relationship between the work world, like all of our programs. So that's important.
For the bachelor's program, if a student is not right in healthcare right when they're applying, what I look for is the availability and opportunity for them to be able to take what they're going to learn in these programs and apply it somewhere, and to bounce ideas off someone who is directly in healthcare. So they need to kind of get linked up with a hospital or a physician's practice, or do some volunteer work, or I'm looking for a trajectory that gets them back into healthcare if they're not in it. Because as Jen said, the courses are so very applied, and you really need to put it in the context of real world challenges. If you don't have that, if you're in isolation from that, it's difficult, very difficult to be successful without that kind of connection. And it's the trajectory. If someone's been around healthcare all their lives, and their family members are in it, and they volunteered and that sort of thing, then that makes a reasonable trajectory into it if they're not already currently in healthcare. Now the masters were a little more stringent. It's 2 years work experience working in healthcare. Sometimes we have students that have a tiny bit of experience like 10 years ago. And will they be able to do the work in the courses now if they're not, there's no trajectory there, right? That makes it difficult. So those are the things that I look for in these gray areas.
It's like having a living lab.
Yeah.
You know,
Yes.
it really is. I mean, your workplace is your lab. And if you don't have a lab, then you can't apply these things and you can't report out on them.
I have 2 questions. It's 30 credits?
Yes, the master's is 30 credits.
Right. And do you have very many students who take 2 courses at a time? Or usually they stick to one?
It's pretty much one at a time. There are occasionally, actually it's funny, I was just reading some student feedback. There's been a couple students who have taken 2 at a time, and in their feedback, I'll never do that again. So the master's, it's one at a time, occasionally 2 at a time. And then the undergrad, as Janet mentioned, is the completer, 60 credits. You have to have an associate's in anything. But most of our associates, most associates are in clinical, or rad tech, lab tech, accounting maybe, but they're in a hospital. They're in the business office of a hospital, or a physician in a hospital. But don't think that it's only hospitals. It's physician practices, it's insurance industry, it's medical equipment device manufacturers. It's actually we had a student who was a veterinary technician, and the reason she wanted the degree was that her husband is a veterinarian, and they're going to create a series of veterinary clinics, and she was going to be the manager of those. And so everything was applicable. So I said, "That's all right. We'll do it." And the only course there wasn't really it wasn't that applicable was the healthcare finance, because veterinary finance is a lot better than you don't get any explanation of benefit when you take your dog.
I want an animal with like the horse legs on the.
So, all right, so yes.
And the other, I think, unique thing about the healthcare bachelor's degree, and I should say Brittany would be here, except she's busy having an exotic vacation. So she's the advisor for the master's program, though I used to do both. The bachelor's degree program does not have a general elective block. And it only has a 3-credit humanities elective. So there's not a lot of place for orphan credits, because they're all pretty specific. So when students talk about transitioning between programs, advisors now know that, as we're talking about the importance of having experience, you can't just go from cyber to healthcare because you want to switch careers. You need to have that healthcare background, and the courses are likely not going to find a home if they've taken a bunch of cyber courses, they're not going to find a home in a healthcare degree because we don't have general elective house for them.
But if they had 60 credits in cyber, they could transfer those and then do the additional 60 credits if they showed some kind of inclination.
Linda, did you have a second question?
No, the one was about the credits and the other one was about students taking more than one course.
At the master's level, how closely do they have to be aligned with the so, for example, would you accept the veterinarian student in the master's?
They'd have to make a good, strong case for it. I think so. I think so, because I think the healthcare, when I think about what's in those courses and what they have to do, many of it does get, the finance course, as I said, it's sort of an outlier, but I think I probably would. I think I would give that a try.
Well, doesn't go human healthcare to be fair?
Right. Healthcare,
Right.
So what is that? Arborist?
I was kind of similar. I'm curious about the grad cert, whether as a standalone or as part of the MBA, isn't it?
Well,
What's that?
the grad cert is part of the master's.
Right, but isn't there?
There is a
Oh, the
cert that
MBA.
that students can embed in the
Yes.
MBA, and then they take the finance MBA course or the
Or the healthcare
healthcare.
finance.
Right,
Yes, so.
to fulfill that requirement.
Right.
And so how do those students will be in the same classes with?
They have to have a healthcare background.
Okay, that's where I was going.
Yes.
Okay.
They have to have the same requirements, because those 5 classes they're in the cohort with those who are, that met that requirement
So
also.
students that choose that or want to choose that, I will always run that. I will send Michael the information. We had one yesterday. So we always have to sign off on. They weren't being run out, if you will.
Because again, it would be pretty difficult for them to, to be successful in a sea of healthcare people.
And what's the difference or the, the benefit of doing the healthcare master's versus the MBA with the healthcare embedded?
We get that question fairly frequently. It depends on what the student's ultimate goal is, I think. You could argue that if you are in healthcare and you want to stay in healthcare, and your idea is to become a VP or a chief nursing officer,
To move within
the healthcare, then really the focus of the healthcare degree on healthcare things makes a lot of sense. If, on the other hand, you want maybe a little more flexibility, you're in healthcare, but you're looking at all those problems I talked about at the beginning, and you say, I want out of here. Which, interestingly, in the next 5 years, 60% of the top senior leadership in healthcare will be retired in the next 5 years. So people are getting out of the field, and so that's why these folks, I'm so happy to have an opportunity to work with them. Very invigorating, very uplifting. But so if you want flexibility, maybe you don't want to be stuck in healthcare. The MBA is a little more general. You still get the healthcare degree certificate. But then you lose a little bit of that focus. You lose some of the focus on healthcare. So it depends on what the ultimate goal is.
Yeah, it may also be that there are people who don't have all of that experience, but they would like to transition. And so that could be something that they perceive they could, kind of move into. I'm not sure. I mean, maybe in the accounting field or something like that, maybe, but yeah, I don't know. The human resources stuff, I think, might be a place that they could
So there
transition to.
there is no real path for career change. We run into the same issue with software. There's lots of demand for people in the field, but there's no easy way for people to transition.
Not really. Not in these 2 programs. It's tough. Yeah. I mean, I try to, again, there's that trajectory that we can look back in the students' experiences, over time, and I'm trying to be really flexible. And to be honest with you, we've made a couple of mistakes where I thought that, gosh, this is a good trajectory and it seems okay, and I think this is going to work out, and then it was very difficult. I think the students made it out okay, but it was a real challenge for them. They had to work a lot harder to be successful than their colleagues because they didn't have the connection that we thought they did.
That's a question kind of related to that too, because I know we've talked in the past how healthcare industry is a closed industry. So really, you have to be in it to be in it.
Secret handshake.
Yeah, and so it's interesting, and I totally understand the rationale for wanting people to be in the industry, to be in this program, and how that raises the quality of the program. And I wish we could do that for other programs, but then it'd be hard to.
Yeah, you limit
Right.
your audience.
Right. But a question I had around this is just your thoughts on the industry. I recently talked with a graduate of the program, and she got laid off. She was a porter, and because they merged with, or UVM took them over,
Right.
and it wasn't a merger, and so she lost her job. She was in HR, and her feedback to me was that she does not. She has worked for UVM well, and she's not interested in working for that big organization. Looking to get out. So I guess I'm curious what your thoughts are on this trend that we're seeing of big umbrella organizations scooping up all these smaller community hospitals, and what that's doing to the industry.
That's prevalent across the country. Small, rural, especially rural community hospitals cannot survive in the current financial situation. As you know, it sort of goes to that weird, your costs are completely flexible about what you can charge and what you get. Your income is regulated, and you can't change that. So it just becomes inefficient. And I think what we're going to start seeing is large medical centers with these smaller sort of clinics or smaller primary care outreach facilities. And then even further, you're going to start to see large, typically university medical centers, but large medical centers start to specialize in certain of the subspecialties. Mm-hmm. So there'll only be like 5 or 6 places you would go for certain kinds of treatment in the country, because people are so mobile now, and so they want to concentrate the expertise in, if you're doing thousands of this procedure every year, you're really good at it, and that's where everybody needs to go to get it. You don't want to have this small rural hospital that does 2 of them a year, spread out all over. It's close by your home, but you want the person who's done this a lot. So we're going to start to see more of this amalgamation and concentration of specialties, and a lot more of this. Rural hospitals are not viable unless something drastic changes in the way we finance healthcare. That said, and where I live in Saranac Lake, our hospital is adamantly, steadfastly going to stay independent. Nobody's taking them over. I'll be back in 6 months, and I'll let you know how that goes.
But that's also going to then have an impact on general.
Well, it's sure. I mean, when they do that, you don't need so many HR people. You don't need so many of this, that, or the other thing. I mean, that's part of the efficiency. You centralize, and you have a materials management director. You have 6 of them in all these different hospitals. You only need 1 because it's all, and that's just what's happening. They have to become more efficient.
It's a unique industry. So somebody that was like middle management, and they decide outside of healthcare, they decide I want to work in the healthcare industry. Probably nothing happening. Whereas they can go out. So it's just an interesting,
And that's what I was talking about, the MBA certificate versus the master's in healthcare. I mean, we cover the same, and the concepts of management are pretty much aligned. And so you could almost argue that if you had the healthcare, you could apply that in other industries. And it would be, like the finance might be even a little easier because it's not quite so crazy. Right? But, again, it goes to what the student goals are. But to get back to your question, I think increased efficiencies, staffing changes, lowering typically. Although primary care clinical providers, a big demand for those. Nurses, technicians, doing the actual care. So if Champlain wanted to get into the nursing degree program or some clinical area, that would be something to do. That's another whole.
The overall result of gobbling up the competitors is there's less competition and less incentive to be efficient.
Well, the incentive for efficiency comes from the government, comes from Medicare. It's not the normal competition. You know what I mean?
Because they can't raise their prices. That's
Insufficient efficiency.
Well, he started and I think you missed that part where he said that the revenues are constrained, but the costs aren't. And so the suppliers can kind of charge what they want, And so the only way to increase that difference is to become more efficient in the cost
So,
end
as
of
an
it.
example, there is I think it's a private surgery operation they wanted to open in Colchester.
All right.
And
I read about that.
UVM screened,
Mhm.
said, they can't do that because it's ours.
Right.
Um,
And they make the case that they do a lot more of them and they're better at it than somebody who does fewer of
But
them.
I see that as a reluctance to compete. They're not willing to.
Yeah, it's true. It's true.
We're losing good doctors and surgeons that way.
Yeah.
Well, they're leaving and going to other countries, for instance, to open up their clinics.
Well, and that's the other trend is that more and more physicians are aligning themselves with organizations. You got big practice groups, hospitals, being a staff member of a hospital rather than, private practices are suffering the same problems of inefficiency. So like a big organization can have a primary care clinic to which they send their physicians, their employees, much more efficiently than the one person having, her practice on the street corner and seeing a small number of patients. So these efficiencies are kind of mixing. Tony, you had a question?
I said, do you find that your programs have a higher retention rate because you have students that have to prove that they deserve to be there?
I like to think so. I don't know if I have a number. I don't know if I know for sure. I don't think I've made that comparison. But I think
Because they have
Yeah.
necessarily higher standards, but they have to jump through hoops, so they would be like, I'm not giving that, I work hard.
I think certainly with this course-to-course project in the master's program, that really kind of loops them, connects them, because they get into the first couple of courses and they're thinking about this in a real innovative way. And then they go, okay, how can we change the financial picture of this? How can we change the IT picture and the legal and regulatory picture? We try not to let them be too creative in the law course, but get in trouble there. But they really try to look at things differently, and that really gets them excited about this. And then they have their employer typically saying, "Wow, this is a really good. We need this done. We want this to be done. We want this." I got a couple of students say, actually ask, "Can I take 2 courses at a time because they want this project done? they want me to end." So that's one person like that. But yeah, I think there might be, and my goal, I would love to figure out a way at the bachelor's level to have a similar kind of cohesion, more cohesion between the courses like we've been accomplished in the master's. It gets really complicated at the bachelor's level because you have people coming in with, they have an associate's degree first of all. It's a completer. How do you cohort them and get them all aligned? But something I dream about.
Is it safe to say that maybe the next phase of development for the program is to figure out the bachelor's to master's transition?
Good to do that. So we would have to reinvent the bachelor's program so that the cohorted nature of that would fit to the so we'd have to revise significantly the bachelor's to make it be along the same lines as the master's so that when they get to the point where they're going from bachelor's to master's, they've got that seamless progression blends right into what the graduate students are doing, right?
Because historically,
Before we revised the master's, so pre-fall of 2015, we did have a bachelor's to master's because they were similar enough that they could take, was it 2?
it was 440,
450.
450, they
Yeah.
could double dip for the 540, 550.
Yeah, they could double dip their 2 courses out of the bachelor's to master's.
Oh, so they took bachelor's courses that you would accept or they would take the master's.
They would take the
Yeah,
master's
but it
course.
seems like they could still start the way all the master's students start with that new course as their last one. I mean, they would have had to do their capstone in the
Well-
undergrad and keep one of those other ones.
Yeah, I'm not sure how that would, I'd have
Yeah.
to play with that. There's probably a way, I'd like to do that.
Yeah.
It's just, we want to make sure that
It
it
works.
makes sense, and it works. Other, yes, Mark?
How are the, like the pharmaceutical reps and the insurance folks and the medical equipment vendors mixing in the online classroom with more traditional healthcare?
Really well.
Yeah.
Really well, yeah, because they add a whole another dimension. You know, you have clinicians who are very patient-centered and provider-centered. You have, more than some administrative folks who are more, finance and project management-centered. But then you have, someone who works in the pharmaceutical sales, for example, or works in medical equipment. They are looking at it certainly also from a patient perspective, but from a whole different side of how can they serve the needs of the clinicians to create the outcomes that they want. So it's an interesting dynamic. They add a whole different sort of perspective and flavor, and they have other different challenges. No, well, sometimes there's also some rough edges in the discussions. Yeah, but they work it out, and I think it's those rough edges are really good. I mean, because it really opens up everybody's eyes to each other's perspectives.
Was the ITS survey or the mid-semester providing information about that? Some data to speak to that? That sounds really interesting.
In the mid-semester feedback discussion, students rarely talk about each other. I don't think I've ever seen students talking about their colleagues.
Right.
They're talking about the course of the instructor, but not each other. So maybe idea.
I don't think they're experiencing the course and having that diversity of professional perspectives would be a notable thing.
Well, I think overall, it's notable because of the end of what they end up with. I mean, they've drawn all those perspectives all along and applied that to the end product of what they go out and do. So I think it's subtle, I mean, it's behind the scenes, it's almost, subconscious. But it would be interesting to study that more.
Which, if you did want to ask about that, you could build that question into your review.
Yeah.
So if
Yeah, I'm gonna
there's
do
a
that.
kind of meaningful place to ask about that,
Yep.
and you want to discuss it in a form.
Yeah, I think that's a good idea. I agree.
Now, you mentioned earlier that you thought that there's still an increase in the need for nursing and for tech staff. Did I hear you right on that?
Yeah, I think as the population demographics change, there are fewer young people that take care of more elderly people. And so in general, I mean, that's.
Well, you and I have talked about this before. I think. So where my son goes to school, they is nursing. That's what they're known for. And Taylor says that every year the big Boston hospitals, the big metro hospitals, all show up and they do vacuum up all the new graduates.
Sure.
He says they don't have to. They're not knocking on doors and answering ads and stuff. They
Right.
just get vacuumed up into the next class. And he said it's amazing. To watch it happen. It's almost it isn't definitely certainly, but they certainly make it look like they're getting a job in the healthcare field. On the nursing home level, it isn't.
It's a real expensive curriculum to do, to present. Because there's so much clinical time, you need to have adjunct clinicians in the place. I'm not sure, an online program would be really interesting, but you'd have to have paid faculty. These programs require paid faculty to be at the sites.
At every hospital.
At every place that a student could possibly be.
Yeah.
And so to make that happen, it could be done, and there are places.
The faculty salaries have to be, they're significantly higher.
Yeah, nurses make a pretty good salary. So he asked one to be a clinical supervisor for some students. You know, so it can be done, but they're expensive, and most the successful ones are, you know, geographic, they're not online, you know, they're brick and mortar because of that. It's just easier, right? There are online programs. There are online bachelor's to master's, you know, BSN, MSN programs. But again, those are starting to require clinical time now, whereas years ago they did not.
Nika considered it probably about 10 years ago, and that's what she came to the conclusion that it just would be so much of an investment, more, and now, especially since we're, you know, doing true ed, it really doesn't make as much sense as it might have at that time.
I think it'd be great, but it'd be really hard to do.
And I've talked to folks at Castleton, BBC, and recruiting and retaining faculty is always a challenge because of the salary.
And then the farther those faculty are away from the supervision of that, you have to make sure you have a really high quality program so that the hospitals do vacuum up your graduates. That's all of those into it. Other questions, thoughts? Okay. Any other questions, comments, thoughts? What's other than that? What are you eagerly wanting to know about?
Well, I'm just thinking Vermont Technical College has a nursing program. I wonder what they do.
It's not on one. Part of it is president.
Some coursework.
It's a associate's level nursing. And then you can, if you pass that, you can go on to the bachelor's part, and then that part of it is.
But it's local students.
Anything else? Other questions? Well, thank you very much. I really appreciate your time. It's like another Tuesday.
I know.
The doors are locked.
All right, thanks everybody. Appreciate it.